So my name's David Charalambous, and to summarise, really I've been studying perception for 25 years, so it's really communication and behaviour expert. So I support a lot of the scientific academic groups in literally how to message, how to have those conversations, and really how to strategise the campaigns to be effective at reaching people.
What have you noticed over the last 2 years? Because there's been a shutdown in communication, and I would say that's happened on both sides, not just one. Why does that shutdown happen? Why do people create these mental barriers to conversation?
Well, yeah, that's a very good question. So the last 2 years, everything's amplified. So it's always been there, but it's never really been there in the same polarisation it is now. So effectively, you know, we take opinions on the information that's in our unconscious mind, and what's happened is that the media plays such a vital role in that when you can convince people of things that might not be strictly true, a lot of the time they won't know. So they're going to project that. So effectively, in a conversation, you have two people standing on the soapbox. The soapbox represents all their knowledge, reservoir of information, beliefs, etc. And generally, they just project that into the conversation, okay? So if two people, let's take masks for instance, if one person thinks masks work and one person thinks masks do not work, that's effectively the end of the conversation, because all they're going to do is just, you know, spout each other's version. That make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. But then there's so many conversations within that should be happening,
Yes.
such as, well, they may work in this environment, but then what are the implications of that? And what stops people from delving deeper into conversation?
Well, I mean, we've literally worked out a process where you can actually have a good conversation. So there's many steps to it, and if you don't get a few of the initial steps right, it doesn't matter what else happens. So one of the things that I'll be talking about today actually is really this divide and conquer that goes on. All the studies show that if you're talking to someone and you consider them to be in a group that's in opposing viewpoints to your group, you will just dismiss what they say. So until that's overcome, there really is no point in having a conversation. So if you look at every political debate that I can ever recall, you have one person say red, one's blue. Have you ever seen someone go, actually, the other guy's right? Have you ever seen that? Never, because the game isn't about finding truth. The game is about winning the conversation. So the first thing we have to do is to really let go of that and find a way to create a conversation where it can be open and honest.
I think that's forgive me if I'm wrong, but to me it seems that's because it's framed as a debate. So the whole point is to try and argue to the best of your ability, your perspective, rather than maybe it needs to be changed to being, instead of, you know, political debate, it needs to be the political conversation. And then we talk about a topic and it's like, okay, what do people have in common? How does that start? If you were to sit down with someone that you might have deeply opposing views with, how should you start that conversation, and what kind of process can you follow to try and open that up within yourself and within them?
Well, you've touched on a really good point there, and it's not new. I mean, it was actually Max Planck that said science moves on one funeral at a time. And what he's referring to is literally the existing beliefs of the person resist any new information. So it's not just the members of the public, it's literally us as humans. The first thing we have to do is create what David Bohm talked about in his really brilliant book, is a dialogue. So it's not sides, it's not any of this thing, it's literally we're on the same side and we're looking at some information. That's the key part. So really the first thing you have to do with talking to someone is let them know you're in their corner, Because if we come from the viewpoint of I'm right and you're wrong, I'm never going to really be able to show you anything, And that's what we really talk about in the project. We've made a series of videos to show people, and it's really interesting because when you see the role play, it begins to make sense.
So does that come down to, say you were to sit down with someone and come to their point of view, it'd be, well, and let's take COVID for an example. It's like, well, we all want to make sure people stay healthy. We all want to see a better world. Like, I agree with you, we don't want people dying, we don't want people getting sick. Let's look at the circumstances of how they might get sick and when they might die and what that conversation actually should be.
Because really what's going on, this is why the media plays such a major role. That a lot of the time, if you're talking to someone and they've really only watched, say, you know, the old media on TV, they're going to adopt a very sort of strong viewpoint on anyone that's questioning the narrative. So in fact, the way to think about it is they're going to have a caricature in their mind. So they're going to say, when people go, oh, you're one of those, are you? So if they call you an anti-vaxxer, what they're effectively saying is, I know what an anti-vaxxer is. They're a person that doesn't care about anyone. They're all this. So there's all these traits that come with that. If you don't break that down, they're not going to be talking to you. They're talking to that character. Yeah, and that's why they're really quite aggressive and rude, because they've been given this pre-prepared script by the media. These are the people that are wrong. This is where you divert your anger. So the first thing to do is really, when you overcome that, you'll see the whole person's just body language shift. They will just really soften, and then they'll be, oh, okay. Yeah, so that's the first hurdle. If you don't overcome that, it really doesn't matter what else you do.
How has the media managed to frame the conversation in such a way that they can alienate mass groups of people without being held accountable?
Well, that is a very good question, because Plato talked about this, and this is a quote that we've used many times this weekend, because it's really, really key. Plato said, those that tell the stories rule society. So effectively, whoever's telling the stories, really, a lot of people will listen to stories and then build their understanding of the world from those stories. So the media is giving people the stories. And that's what happens. And we learn the most effectively by listening to stories. So if you then try to give people facts, it doesn't go in because it's not in a story form. And this is why people kind of dismiss stories, but that is literally the most effective way to share information. Yeah, and that's what the media are doing. So media has very much what should have been concerning to all, is a single consistent story. That's never happened in history, and that never should happen in history. There should be loads of viewpoints. But it takes away a lot of the discomfort for people to say, oh, there's one single story. And obviously, your glorious leader said that we are the single source of truth. I mean, that's ludicrous to anyone that's critically thinking. Yeah, so that's why the media plays such a major role.
Locally in New Zealand, we've been having the local body government elections, which is like local council. So the media have been targeting people that are unvaccinated or that have followed any group that might be promoting individual choice, that type of thing.
Yeah.
To the extent that just a couple of days ago, my own city made people stand up if they were vaccinated who are running for council, so that they could show everyone the unvaccinated people. How much of a role do you think that type of behaviour plays in, I guess, swaying an election towards specific candidates?
Massively, if you've been able to convince the public that whatever the label is immoral. So if being unvaccinated makes you immoral and selfish and all these other terms that they attributed it to, it plays a major role. Yeah, because effectively in our brain, if we see someone as immoral, we then sort of see them almost as less than human, and then we will support, in many places, they start supporting violence and repression against those people. That's why the constant bombardment of making, say, unvaccinated, a lower class of society is hugely problematic. Yeah, because people really will then be taking a lot of prejudice towards those people.
Our Prime Minister actually said, she was asked if she was creating two classes of people, and she said, yes, actually, we are. What impact does that have psychologically on the people that are in the lower class?
Well, they're gonna be traumatised to a certain degree. They're gonna then have their own blowback in feeling resentment towards people that have really judged them. So you're going to have this real divide that goes on, and then you're going to see prejudice between those two classes. I mean, it's hugely problematic. And this is really what starts all the conflicts. When you look at this, it's when two groups of people will see each other as different and then compare themselves and see the other ones as immoral. That's when it starts, the conflict.
Do you see similarities? Because you would have studied the psychology behind how they convinced the Germans to be okay with what happened to the Jewish people. Do you see similarities throughout history of what governments have done to the people versus what's happening now worldwide?
Same structure, exactly the same structure. In fact, the talk today is exactly what I'm talking about, because there's a really powerful story from 1914 where at Christmas they had a truce. So you had the troops from both the British soldiers and the German soldiers were then allowed to go out into no man's land to recover the bodies. And then what happened was, and it's really icy ground, is they started helping each other bury the bodies. And then they started talking and communicating and then exchanging addresses to communicate after the war. And then they played the famous football match. They didn't want to fight anymore. They never saw each other now as, as German and English soldiers. So it's another human being. That makes sense? So that broke this divide and conquer. But it's the same tactic. It's really three stages. You get basically a label, whether it be us and them and whatever us be, whether it be British soldiers, German soldiers. Then the people have to identify with that. So then you get the patriotism and all these things. And then the third thing is comparison. So if we compare ourselves to them and we're better, then we will do potentially harmful things to the other group.
What advice would you have for people moving forward to try and bridge those gaps? And especially in families that have been really disconnected, where they've had polarising views, and now there's just that estrangement, which is awful. How do they go about trying to repair those relationships?
Yeah, well, we've actually made a lot of videos on this, and we do things about building bridges, but the first thing is to listen, okay? Because the way that we see anyone that we're talking to is going to really govern how we use our tone, our physiology, all these things. So if we've got lots of resentment to them, that's going to be very problematic. So we've almost got to, and it's not fair because, you know, of what's happened to the people that have been repressed. But if we can find a way to let that go or get over it, at least put it to one side, and then reconnect to that person before we even enter into conversations. You've literally got to find common ground. What is it we share an opinion on? Once you have that common ground, then you can start doing many things, because unless you get that, it really won't go anywhere.
Lucky last question. If we are to try and unify people moving forward, what is the best way media can help to do that?
Well, this is where we create a unification between the people. Yeah, what really does unite people against a common enemy, you know, whether that be even a concept. So a lot of people got united together against COVID. And then obviously a lot of people started seeing holes in the story, and then people were then united against them. So yeah, it's really, if people basically, if you have groups that are estranged, they need to come together and they need to have equal status in the conversation, even if it's not outside. And then the second thing is that they need to work towards a common goal. Once you work towards a common goal, then the barriers break down. So that's really key. And if you can get someone, you know, to be the arbiter, that really assists things. But it's really, once people see each other as the same, then everything changes.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Your talk today goes really, really well. Is there any last things that you'd like people to know?
I would say that I think there is a lot of hope. I think that behavioural science has learnt some startling discoveries about how we behave and how we make decisions. And I think that when the people start to understand this and take the power back, that everything's going to change.
Actually, I've got one more. When we talk about cults and mass formation hypnosis and mass formation psychosis, how does that impact on the COVID conversation? Do you see that on both sides, or do you see it more on one side than the other? And where do you think that comes from?
Well, I think it's a natural thing that occurs within the vulnerability that we have as humans. And yes, it does occur on, and of course that's the thing, to even think there's two sides is where we get this, and it's hard not to, because there are effectively two main viewpoints, and then hundreds of subtle ones. But for me, mass formation is really a large body of people agreeing on the same thing, yeah? Now that tends to happen when a lot of them are not really thinking rather than following, and that's when you get this mass formation. And that's where really with cults you get a single charismatic leader that's able to influence everyone else. So when you join a group, the potential for that group's belief system to overwrite your own is there, and that's when you start seeing mass formation, and people's new behaviours come into that. So yeah, that's really a very key thing, is that what we need to break that is people to critically think, to really ask questions and challenge it. And that's where what has to be present is the ability to challenge, yeah? And it's not been present for the last 2 years.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. There's so much depth to that material that once you start to understand what they're doing, yeah, it's really useful. So here's another very important tip when you're talking to someone, particularly if they have different views or they're not aware of the things that you know about. So if you think about anything that you've learned, you know, at the ground floor, this is the common knowledge that everyone knows. And then you sort of build these floors of knowledge one after the other. And then you often get to a point of a conclusion in the penthouse that's sometimes really uncomfortable. We have a tendency to share data from this penthouse. We have to understand that the people haven't come in the lobby of the hotel yet. So what we say to people is really think about connecting to that person from the lobby and then walking them through a story so they can arrive at the same conclusion as you. Because otherwise you're effectively giving them the punchline of a joke without the body of a joke, and they're really not going to understand it. And this had the tendency to shut people down very quickly. So we kind of say, don't go off piece, you know, talk about things that are in the public sphere and just lead them through, because otherwise you're just going to get this confused look, and generally the conspiracy theory, many of those terms, because you're talking about things that are very complex, and of course once you understand, you know, that knowledge has to be, you know, structured in such a way that the person can connect with it and understand it. And on that level, really don't provide conclusions, because what you want to do is, because Jerome Bruner in the 60s and the 70s showed that if you tell someone a raw fact versus the fact in a story, the story will land 22 times more effectively. So this is the thing, start at the common ground, share stories, use metaphors, ask very good questions, and then you can actually start to build people up to follow you through that until they can get to the penthouse as well.